The fossil that shouldn't exist. When a dinosaur bone revealed human DNA, the discovery began, as many great mysteries do, with something small and ordinary, an old bone fragment found where none should have been. In the summer heat of a remote dig site in Montana, a team of paleontologists brushed away dust from what they believed was the femur of a late Cretaceous dinosaur. They expected to find rock, fossilized mineral, the usual remains turned to stone over 65 million years. But what they uncovered wasn't stone at all. Inside the cracked surface, they saw something soft, something that shimmered faintly under the light. When the lead researcher lifted it closer, she realized the impossible. The tissue flexed, it moved. It looked disturbingly alive. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence felt heavier than the desert air. Dinosaur bones are not supposed to have soft tissue. Every textbook, every theory of fossilization said that after millions of years, all organic matter should decay completely, replaced by minerals until only stone remained. Yet here, it was a fresh fragment of material that looked like blood vessels, still red, still pliable. Some scientists whispered contamination, others dismissed it as misidentification, but when they tested it, the results were even stranger. The chemical analysis hinted at hemoglobin, the molecule that carries oxygen in blood. Hemoglobin in a bone older than humanity itself. The news spread quietly at first, confined to a handful of research institutions. The world wasn't ready to hear that a dinosaur might still carry the molecular fingerprints of life. The idea was too disruptive, too chaotic for the neat timeline of evolution that science had built. Still, word leaked. An anonymous source claimed that DNA sequences were extracted from the sample, and not just any DNA. The sequences allegedly matched fragments found in humans. The claim sounded absurd, impossible, a fantasy invented by conspiracy theorists. But the scientist who first handled the sample, Dr. Marion Keller, knew what she had seen under the microscope. It wasn't human contamination. The structure was too embedded, too old. Something else was going on. Dr. Keller's team had worked under the university's supervision, funded partly by private donors interested in the genetic evolution of vertebrates. When the anomaly appeared, those donors suddenly went silent. Within weeks, the university confiscated the specimen for further analysis. Keller was told not to discuss her findings publicly. Her colleagues noticed her growing unease. Then, 2 months later, she resigned without explanation. The fossil disappeared into a private lab in Virginia. For years, nothing more was said. But secrets buried in stone have a way of resurfacing. A graduate student named Aaron West, who had worked briefly under Keller, began piecing together her notes. He noticed that she had cross-referenced the tissue analysis with genetic markers found in ancient human remains from southern Africa, markers associated with mitochondrial DNA, the part passed down only through the maternal line. According to Keller's notes, the match was faint but undeniable. To Aaron, that meant only one thing. Somewhere in the vast expanse of prehistory, a connection existed between creatures separated by 65 million years. When he tried to publish his interpretation, the paper was rejected repeatedly. Reviewers called it biologically implausible. Yet Aaron couldn't ignore what the data suggested. He began traveling, visiting old dig sites where soft tissue claims had surfaced before. From the Gobi Desert to Patagonia, reports whispered of fossils that hadn't fully turned to stone. Most were dismissed or hidden away, but a few, when analyzed independently, showed similar organic traces, amino acids, collagen, even fragments of proteins that resisted degradation far longer than expected. It seemed nature was keeping secrets in the ground, secrets we were never meant to uncover. The deeper Aaron looked, the more patterns he saw. Sites with preserved tissue often lay near regions where magnetic anomalies had been recorded, areas rich in rare earth minerals that might somehow slow decay. But another theory emerged, darker and stranger. Some ancient texts from Sumer and pre-Vedic India spoke of beings who walked among the great reptiles and shared their blood. To most historians, these were myths, metaphors for gods and demons. But if even a fraction of that mythology held truth, could it point to an ancient biological overlap between early hominids and pre-mammalian life? The idea sounded insane, yet the data refused to vanish. In 2009, a small independent lab in Eastern Europe claimed to replicate Keller's findings using a fragment of hadrosaur bone. Their sequencing equipment detected short repeating chains of nucleotides resembling human mitochondrial DNA. When the results were announced online, they vanished within days. The lab's website went offline, and the team members stopped responding to inquiries. All official records of the experiment disappeared from public databases. Skeptics called it a hoax, but those who had archived the data before deletion noticed something chilling. The sequences matched not modern human DNA, but an archaic lineage, one associated with a mysterious, unclassified branch of early humans known only through trace samples in Central Asia. It was as if the fossil held a memory of a genetic code older than civilization. Scientists debated endlessly. Was it contamination, coincidence, or evidence that humanity's roots stretched back into epochs we thought impossible? Aaron believed Keller's discovery had threatened more than scientific pride. It had challenged the fundamental story of what we are and where we came from. If human-like DNA existed inside a dinosaur fossil, even in microscopic fragments, then our lineage might not be as separate from the deep past as we assumed. He traveled to Virginia, hoping to find Keller or anyone who could lead him to the missing specimen. The trail led to a small private research company registered under a shell corporation. When he arrived, the building was half abandoned. But in the dusty archives, he found something, a faded report stamped, "Confidential property of North Star Biogen." Inside were photos of the same femur Keller had excavated, sliced thin for analysis. In the margin of one photo, a note in Keller's handwriting read, "Human markers confirmed. Source stable." That was all Aaron needed. He began leaking small pieces of information online under a pseudonym. At first, the scientific community ignored him. Then, in 2016, an anonymous whistleblower uploaded several of Keller's raw datasets to an encrypted form. The sequences were genuine, biologically coherent, and consistent with preserved organic molecules, but no one could explain the human correlation. Public attention grew rapidly, forcing institutions to issue denials. Still, the data remained. Something inside that fossil carried echoes of us. If the story ended there, it would already be strange enough. But in 2018, satellite imagery revealed something new. An unexplained formation near the Montana dig site, a circular pattern of stone partially buried beneath sediment. Archaeologists thought it was a natural feature, until ground-penetrating radar showed a symmetrical structure beneath tunnels and chambers laid out like a laboratory. Carbon dating of nearby organic residue suggested activity around 70 million years ago. How could that be? No civilization existed then. Officially, the dinosaurs ruled the Earth. Yet the underground formation aligned perfectly with the strata containing Keller's fossil. Aaron and a small documentary crew entered the region under the guise of a geology study. What they found inside those chambers would turn speculation into obsession. Etched into the stone walls were carvings, not random scratches, but deliberate geometric symbols matching human proto-writing found in caves dated only 30,000 years old. Side by side, fossilized remains of reptiles and primates lay arranged in patterns, as if part of an experiment. Some bones bore cut marks precise enough to suggest tools, and one massive slab contained impressions of both reptilian scales and a human-like handprint fossilized together. It was impossible, yet there it was. If this evidence was real, then humanity's history wasn't just older, it was intertwined with something non-human, something that predated recorded time. The discovery never reached mainstream headlines. Within weeks, authorities sealed the area for environmental protection. Aaron's crew disappeared, leaving behind only partial footage and audio logs hinting at what they'd uncovered. Those fragments suggested that below the fossil chamber, deeper tunnels led to something else, a preserved vault containing crystalline structures and metal tools embedded in stone tens of millions of years old. The last known recording of Aaron's voice ends with a single sentence. "It's not a fossil, it's a message. For decades, mainstream science had painted the prehistoric world as a clean timeline. Dinosaurs vanished, mammals evolved, humans eventually appeared. That neat story was suddenly unraveling, with every new piece of evidence leaking from Keller's original work and Aaron's investigations. Fossils that shouldn't exist hinted at an overlapping reality where species we thought were separated by tens of millions of years might have intersected in ways no one could explain. Researchers who dared to speak publicly about these anomalies faced ridicule, funding cuts, and academic ostracism, creating a culture of silence around findings that challenged orthodoxy. Yet, in hidden laboratories, carefully preserved specimens whispered a story the textbooks refused to tell. Blood vessels, soft tissue, and minute strands of DNA stubbornly survived the eons, carrying secrets encoded in a molecular memory too precise to be dismissed as contamination. Each fragment seemed to say that life on Earth was far stranger than anyone had admitted, that the past was not a linear march, but a tangled web, hiding truths that could rewrite the very foundation of human history. The implications were staggering. If human-like DNA truly existed in a dinosaur fossil, even in fragments, it suggested a reality so improbable that most minds refused to entertain it. What could it mean? Were humans the result of some hidden evolutionary branch that coexisted with ancient reptiles? Or was there an intelligence at work in prehistory, manipulating life forms in ways that defied understanding? Some theorists began looking beyond biology, tracing legends and artifacts that spoke of beings with knowledge far beyond their time, stories of gods, advanced civilizations, and creatures that bridged the gap between human and beast. Aaron found himself sifting through obscure manuscripts, translations of Sumerian texts, and early Vedic writings that described enormous serpentine creatures alongside humans, sometimes even hinting at shared bloodlines. Each passage seemed fantastical, almost absurd, but the more he read, the more he noticed subtle consistencies, patterns that mirrored the strange DNA signatures in Keller's fossil. The line between myth and reality blurred, and for the first time, he began to feel that the world had been hiding something much bigger than fossils or bones. Aaron's investigation led him to the outskirts of the Gobi Desert, where decades earlier, other paleontologists had reported soft tissue preserved in hadrosaur fossils. Those finds had largely been dismissed or quietly shelved, buried in archives and dusty journals. Yet Aaron noticed an uncanny similarity. The same molecular remnants, the same resilience of protein structures, and occasionally, the same human-like DNA fragments reported in Keller's data. He began mapping these anomalies, connecting dots across continents, and the pattern was undeniable. Sites scattered across North America, Asia, and South America seemed to form invisible lines, almost like markers in a prehistoric map. What if these sites weren't random? What if there was an underlying intelligence or force guiding the placement of these fossils? A hidden signature left behind by beings whose knowledge and intentions were lost to time. The thought was frightening, but exhilarating. For the first time, Aaron felt he was not just uncovering fossils, he was uncovering a story deliberately encoded into the earth itself. A story that challenged everything humans thought they knew about life, death, and time. As Aaron dug deeper, he began to realize that this mystery wasn't just about biology, it was about secrecy and control. The labs, the confiscated fossils, the sudden disappearances of researchers who dared to speak, all pointed to a deliberate effort to suppress the truth. He discovered correspondence between Keller and several private research foundations, hinting at unexplained findings that were to be kept classified. The more he read, the more it became clear that this wasn't an isolated incident. Fossils with anomalous tissue had been quietly acquired by private collectors, sometimes vanishing into locked vaults where no independent verification could occur. It seemed that whoever controlled these discoveries understood their potential to destabilize the very foundations of science. And yet, despite the obstacles, the evidence kept resurfacing. In every hidden lab, in every archive sample, the same story appeared. Organic material that should have decayed millions of years ago was stubbornly surviving, whispering secrets that human civilization might never have been prepared to hear. Aaron's next breakthrough came when he examined a series of fossilized footprints in Texas, famously dismissed by mainstream paleontology. The tracks appeared to show large dinosaur prints, alongside smaller, human-like footprints. Most scientists wrote them off as misinterpretations or natural anomalies, but Aaron couldn't ignore the timing and placement. When overlaid with the DNA anomalies from Keller's and other soft tissue fossils, the footprint patterns suggested a disturbing possibility. Humans, or at least human-like beings, might have existed alongside creatures that, according to current timelines, should have been extinct for tens of millions of years. The more he cross-referenced data, the more the story refused to fit the neat, linear history we had been taught. It was as if someone or something was deliberately leaving clues for those willing to look. In his research, Aaron began connecting these scientific anomalies with historical records, myths, and legends. Ancient Sumerian tablets spoke of beings who created humans in their own image, while Vedic texts described nagas, serpent-like entities that coexisted with early mankind. Egyptian hieroglyphs hinted at hybrid creatures and strange, elongated beings influencing human evolution. At first, Aaron was skeptical. How could mythology intersect with molecular biology? Yet the DNA evidence, the anomalous fossils, and the geological patterns all seemed to converge with these ancient stories. It was as if human memory, folklore, and biology were narrating the same hidden history, each in its own language. Finally, Aaron's search brought him back to Montana.